Lesson 29, Politics. Everybody's favorite subject, politics. And we're going to look at ethics in politics. And no, it's not an oxymoron. Well, it might be an oxymoron. It's totally an oxymoron. No, it's not an oxymoron. Actually, I don't really know. One thing I do know is that if you take another philosophy course, if you choose philosophy as your liberal arts requirement in college, it is very likely you will have politics as a separate branch of philosophy. Now, this class, as you know, we're only using 5, and it's a high school class, and we have limited time. And the 5 units would be epistemology that we've already learned about, and aesthetics, and we're about to wrap up ethics with logic and metaphysics ahead. But again, a lot of people feel politics should be a 6th branch, and they're not off the mark. And some people object to me. They say, hey, Salzaccioli, you should have politics as one of the units. So I feel a need to talk to those people. So the reason why I don't, quite honestly, a lot of people don't like talking about politics. In fact, of all of the units of philosophy, ethics can be the most off-putting to some people. These are people who tend to be introverted. They don't like this mental sparring and those, the blood gets going, this, personal issues or controversial issues. Now, some people eat it up. They love going toe to toe. They love, the mental agility. And some people just want it to be over. And so for those people, we're just going to spend a couple days on it, not make it a whole unit. And on a practical level, in order to graduate, you need to take both government and civics. So I'll let those 2 teachers handle the heavy lifting on the topic. There's a lot of politics in those 2 classes. And what do all of these people in funny red hats and funny gray hats have in common? They took government and civics. So what we did in class is we looked at our own political views. So instead of me just throwing a bunch of views and turning it into a chaotic mess where I think, I feel, blah, 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 take a quick epistemological time period to really look at yourself. Where are you coming from? And there's several of these quizzes. I happen to choose this one. I thought it was a good one. And you will be placed in a spectrum. Now, this is where I fit in on the spectrum. I learned some things about me. I tend to be socially liberal, but more fiscally conservative. I tend to lean toward libertarianism, definitely to the left. And most people are in that bell curve in the middle. We had some outliers, some very extreme rights and some extreme lefts and some authoritarian and some libertarian. But I really want you to look at yourself first by taking this quiz. And then the second thing we did is we picked an issue where we formulated an argument in a presentation based upon what you think is the most ethical policy in regards to these issues. And I threw out there, just for suggestions, affirmative action, separation of church and state, criminal justice issues, retribution versus rehabilitation, how to prevent recidivism, the opioid epidemic, educational policy, what should be taught in schools, that kind of thing, immigration requirements, First Amendment issues, religious liberty, censorship, Second Amendment issues related to gun control and gun ownership, civil rights issues, people who are fighting for equality in the society, budget, a fiscal issue, where should America allocate its money, the ethics of the current political administration, or any other political issue from the quiz that you are passionate about or knowledgeable about. So with that, armed with the research and the argument, when you go in front of the people, when you went in front of the people, okay, how did you handle the critiques, the counters, and the questions that, you were peppered with? Now, if you go up there and your premise is weak, it's going to get knocked down. You're going to get reduced to absurdity, reductio ad absurdum. Now, when your classmates didn't question you and I dug into you, were you ready to have that armor to weather that storm? And again, you got to ask yourself, some people have presented, other people have not. They're waiting to. Now, when you all go up there, we're all going to ask ourselves, were your assertions ethical, right and wrong? Were they logical? Were your assertions grounded in evidence, or are you just appealing to emotion or anecdotal stories? And sometimes young people have a tendency, who aren't in their mature arguing form, to say, I'm going to talk loud, I'm going to throw emotion into it, and that adds some more gravitas to the argument. It doesn't. It just doesn't. And anecdotal stories. Oh, my Aunt Betty once told me. Oh, yeah, with one guy I knew, all my neighbors said. Okay, those are anecdotal stories. Maybe a good hook for an opening. It does not constitute an argument. And, you know, I think it was a tough exercise for a lot of you to go up there and assert your point. But, you know, politics are important, even if you don't care for them, even if you don't like to talk about them. The politicians in our world dictate a lot of what goes on in our world. And some parting words on the subject by Machiavelli, the Italian philosopher and writer. And Machiavelli said, the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. So the people who are our people in Congress, our senators, our president, our governor, our state senate, our house, our state house, your mayor, it doesn't matter. Look at the political figure and ask yourself, who are they surrounding themselves with? Which organizations are they surrounding themselves with? Are they ethical groups or unethical groups? Because that's a pretty good litmus test. Check their people. Birds of a feather flock together. So when you get to voting age, and a few of you are at voting age, look at their people. And that will tell you whether they are intelligent and likely whether they are ethical, or at least how you see ethics. And some main points of the lesson. Now, there's no journal entry today. Obviously, creating a presentation and going up there, I think the point has been made. We don't need to write, but hopefully you got these 5 points. Ethics in its simplest form is the evaluation of what is wrong and what is right. Politics can prove difficult. These are not black and white issues. So if an old lady falls on the sidewalk, you can make an argument that you can just walk on by. But I think the vast majority of people on a very practical level say it was right to help the old lady stand up who slipped on the sidewalk, or if a kid drops their binder and papers go everywhere. I think it's a pretty hard argument to say it's not ethical to help the kid pick up their binder. Politics isn't like that. Difficult, complex, gray areas. So have some sympathy for the politicians. It's a ridiculously difficult thing to be. Now, in a democratic republic, law in theory is supposed to reflect the consensus of the people. Now, just our small little class, it was hard to get consensus on any of these political issues. You see how difficult it is. Now, keep scaling that number from our class of 2530 to a school, to a city, to a state, to a country. Very, very difficult. Now, in a culturally pluralistic society like America, consensus is difficult to achieve. So there's going to be some sour grapes, and this is related to the last point. But it's a virtual impossibility for our elected officials to be in there without some people objecting to it. So bear that in mind. And do politicians vote out of ethics or for other motives? Being ethical, will that make you successful in politics? Will being ethical make you will it impede your success in politics? Which politicians are ethical in your opinion? Which ones are unethical, and be able to back it up? And what does ethical versus unethical policy look like? How do you achieve this with social issues that are difficult to justify with empirical arguments? So, like politics in the real world, I think I've left you with more questions, but hopefully you learned a little bit about yourself and that you showed that you were brave by getting in front of the people and presenting your argument, and smart in being able to critique and question your classmates. So hopefully it was a positive drill now that we're done with it. So I appreciate your participation, and I appreciate you watching.